Cormac McCarthy is pompous, pretentious, pedantic, and even ponderous. He's the dreaded quadruple P, and the only people who pretend to enjoy his work are other pompous, pretentious, pedantic, and ponderous people. At least that's what the detractors say. I myself am not a Cormac McCarthy detractor. In fact, he's one of the only modern writers that I read regularly. Used to be able to say he was one of the only living writers that I read regularly, but old Cormac passed away somewhat recently. I think it was like a year or two ago. But still, he's one of the only modern writers of fiction, of literature. I read, obviously, plenty of modern nonfiction writers. But in terms of literature, Cormac McCarthy was one of the only modern writers that I read every word of his, every book. I jumped on it. I've read most of his books more than once, and in fact, I have begun reading all of his books, going all the way back to The Orchard Keeper, his first one. I'm going to read them all the way through. I'm going to be covering them in deep dives on this channel, in fact. And if you want to join me, you're welcome to, which reminds me to mention, if you'd like to subscribe, I think I'll have some stuff coming for you that you would like, but that's up to you. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. So, I think Cormac McCarthy was an absolute genius for saying so little about his books. You know, all his career, he was hounded for interviews. People wanted to know about him because his works were so mysterious and seemed to have so much depth. He said very little, and I think that was very wise of him. For many reasons, but the main one is it will give him like artistic immortality, in my opinion. And what I love about his approach is that every one of his books there are these mysteries that I can return to, and I can find new secrets in them, new symbols, just new depth, and they're just amazing works of art. And every time I go back to them, I find something new. Now, the reason why I'm making this video is to get back to those people who think he's pompous, pretentious, pedantic, and ponderous and all of this. I can actually understand their perspective. I really can. But I in my opinion, and even though what I just said about we don't really know much about why Cormac wrote what he wrote, I wanted to say that because nobody really knows, right? We don't really know what he was getting across with his writing. Maybe now that he's passed away, we'll get some kind of his notes or something will appear. I actually hope that doesn't happen. I probably won't read them even if they do appear. I prefer to keep his works of art as they are, both because I love him that way and out of respect to him. So, what I'm about to say does not come from some kind of research into Cormac McCarthy's writing about his writing, but it's how I read Cormac McCarthy, and I do think it is the way to read and appreciate Cormac McCarthy. And so, McCarthy is almost universally recognized or thought of as like a hard-boiled realist writer, right? And what I mean by that is, well, people think of him as a realist writer. And I think the reason why that comes across is because his books can be so harsh and so morally unforgiving, by which I mean, like, there is no instant karma in a Cormac McCarthy book. It doesn't really appear to be any karma at all. The bad guys often win, and the good guys often do not get good rewards for their goodness. One of the examples, there's been a few times I was actually as angry at a book as I was at No Country for Old Men when Llewellyn died, and when they went back through the last hours of his life, and they thought that he had slept with that one woman who was by the pool. It was a woman that he met at a hotel, and that really bugged me because Llewellyn actually did have the chance to do that, and he didn't do it. He did the right thing. He was a man of honor, and yet he passed away. And his wife doesn't know that. She thinks that he was unfaithful to her. I was like, Cormac, why, man? Why do you have to do that? But anyway, that's why Cormac, I think, mainly gets this reputation that he has. But I actually think of Cormac McCarthy more as a magic realist author. I don't think his books are just set in like a materialist world. By material, I mean scientific materialism. The idea that there is no spirit or God or meaning or anything. To me, the genius of Cormac McCarthy is that his works, I believe, are magic realists. They're putting us in a reality that isn't quite this reality. It's like blurring the lines between realities. But the reason why people don't think that, or most people don't think of him that way, in my opinion, with the exception of Outer Dark. Outer Dark is clearly like a work of strange fantasy. It's like a nightmare or a dream put into book form. But anyway, the other books, I still think he is dealing with kind of a mythical reality. I don't think he's dealing with this reality. It's a reality where it's a world where reality is blurred, and there's kind of like a, I don't like to call it a spirit world because I just think that maybe sounds kind of trite and almost silly, but essentially that is what it is. I think it is this like ethereal ghost world. But the thing is, it's not in the events so much generally. I could point to some events in some of his books that I think are pretty overt in the way that they discuss this or the way that they bring forth this kind of alternate reality. But I'm talking more about his general approach to writing. And what I'm saying specifically is the way that he uses language itself is how he bends and distorts reality and brings forth this other realm that's hiding behind, just beyond the surface of the realm that we all live in, right? And he uses language itself, and he does this in many ways, but he uses, like, number one, he just uses very strange and archaic words. A lot of times he uses words that were like popular use in much earlier America, but have fallen so out of use that they might as well not even be like words of the English language because nobody's ever heard them before. But I think he's doing that intentionally. I mean, I'm sure part of it is he's just a lover of language, or was just a lover of language, as am I. I love words, I love sentences, I love just poetry. I just love the poetry of language. But I'm sure there was part of that, but I don't think that was all of it. I think Cormac was creating this alternative reality by using his language. By using these old and unfamiliar and strange words, he can describe a scene in which if you were to just show the events on film, it would just be a regular scene. It might even be boring. But it's his language. He's actually kind of similar to Jack Kerouac in that way. Like, Jack Kerouac wrote about only what was happening in front of him, but it was the ecstasy and the enthusiasm of his language that made it seem like something broader. But I think Cormac takes that to another level. And Cormac distorts reality and puts us into a dream world largely through his use of language. And to me, that's how I read Cormac McCarthy, and I think that's how people who consider him pompous, pretentious, pedantic, etc., I think that's how they could read him and appreciate him a little bit more. He's keeping you in this realm, but through sheer language, he's blurring the lines, and he's bringing us into something more mythical, like more of a mythological kind of, maybe instead of spirit world, more like a mythological, symbolic world, right? A little reference to Jonathan Page out there. But it's more of like a symbolic world that he brings forth. And so the reason why, I mean, I love it for many reasons, but one of the reasons why I think it is so amazing is because when you distort those lines too much with the events itself, when you go into like a full-blown magic realism, there's kind of like a separation that to me, it's hard to really emotionally and philosophically really hold on to those stories. They might be entertaining, but they're not really, to me, generally meaningful. Right, like I love some magic. I've loved some great magic realist novels and even some fantasy. I mean, when I started falling in love with reading, I was largely reading like the Dragonlance Chronicles and like fantasy books, you know, like Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and stuff. But when somebody writes that way, it's cool, it's entertaining, but it doesn't quite have that same impact on the mind and on the soul as the way Cormac does it. Because we have all of the trappings of this world. But with language, he takes this world and blurs the edges, and he brings forth the mythical and the symbolic and the deeper level of information, which is how I think of it. When I think of like the spiritual world, I think it's just like deeper levels of information that are just beyond what we see. It's like when you look at your browser, there's actually all these different programming languages in it, going all the way back to the binary, all the way in the back, you know, just the on and off switch. That's how I kind of tend to see reality itself, right? Like we see the real things around us, but there's deeper levels of information behind it. We just don't right now have the perceptive capacities to see it all. And I think Cormac brings that out. He brings out the symbolic. He brings out the mythical through the language itself. And so I don't want to keep making this point, so I'm going to stop this now. But that's my point. To those people who do not appreciate Cormac McCarthy, give him another whirl and try to read him this way. Try to read that language that he's using is not some purposeless exercise in his ego. He's not just trying to say, hey, look how smart I am. And it's not just another bunch of other pretentious people who are trying to say, look how smart I am because I read Cormac. I think there's a reason for it. And I think there's a reason those of us who love Cormac do love Cormac. And I think that's why. And when you look at it that way, when you look at it as Cormac bringing forth another layer of reality, his books just become really profound and just endlessly fascinating, and beautiful. Not really, I wouldn't call Cormac McCarthy an entertaining writer usually, although when Cormac wants to be funny, he can be. Some of the funniest scenes I've ever read are by Cormac, especially Sutchery with Gene Harrogate. That character is hilarious. But his stories, they're not entertaining, but they are beautiful. In being beautiful, there is that kind of entertainment. But they are stories to immerse yourself in this mythical, symbolic world and to see reality in a different way. And rather than bringing that forth with overt and obvious scenes like wizards and magic and stuff coming out, he does it with sheer language. And I think it's fascinating, and I expect to be rereading his books till the day I die. And I just think those people who don't see him that way, I really do think you're missing out, and I think you should give him another whirl. So that's about it. Peace out, my friends. I hope you've all been well.